Welcome to Biblical Bites, where we discuss various topics through a biblical lens. Today's topic is punishment. Punishment is a concept that appears frequently throughout the Bible, from the consequences of Adam and Eve's disobedience in Genesis to the teachings of Jesus in the New Testament. Understanding how the Bible addresses punishment can offer us valuable insights into God's character, the nature of justice, and the importance of mercy and repentance. In this video, we'll take a closer look at various instances of punishment in the Bible, examining both divine and human-administered consequences. We'll also explore the balance between justice and mercy, as well as how punishment is meant to lead us back to righteousness. This exploration is essential, as it helps us better understand the moral and ethical teachings that underpin Christian faith and practice. By understanding the biblical perspective on punishment, we can gain a deeper appreciation of how these ancient texts continue to shape our views on justice, discipline, and forgiveness today. Before we get started, make sure that you are subscribed to the channel so you can always see these videos. Let's dive in and explore what the Bible really says about punishment. The concept of punishment in the Bible evolves from the Old Testament to the New Testament, reflecting different aspects of God's relationship with humanity. In the Old Testament, punishment is often portrayed as a direct consequence of sin, with God administering justice in a tangible and immediate way. Examples include the exile of Adam and Eve from Eden, the Great Flood, and the plagues of Egypt. These punishments serve as both a response to disobedience and a means to restore order and righteousness among God's people. In contrast, the New Testament introduces a more nuanced understanding of punishment, particularly through the teachings of Jesus. While the idea of divine justice remains, there's a greater emphasis on forgiveness, mercy, and repentance. Jesus often speaks of the consequences of sin, but he also highlights the importance of grace and the opportunity for redemption. The shift from the Old Testament's more retributive justice to the New Testament's focus on forgiveness reflects the broader message of love and reconciliation in the teachings of Christ. The Bible also distinguishes between divine punishment, which is administered directly by God, and human-administered punishment, which is carried out by individuals or governing authorities. Divine punishment is seen as an expression of God's perfect justice, while human-administered punishment is intended to maintain order and righteousness within the community. However, the Bible also cautions against abuse of this authority, emphasizing the need for fairness, mercy, and humility in administering justice on behalf of God. The Bible provides several significant examples of punishment, starting with the story of Adam and Eve's expulsion from the Garden of Eden. After disobeying God's command by eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, Adam and Eve face immediate consequences. Their expulsion marks the beginning of human suffering and toil, symbolizing the loss of innocence and the entrance of sin into the world. This punishment is not only a response to their disobedience, but also a profound lesson about the seriousness of violating God's commands. Another key example is the flood in the time of Noah. As humanity's wickedness grows, God decides to cleanse the earth through a great flood, sparing only Noah and his family, who are righteous in God's eyes. The flood represents a severe form of divine punishment intended to reset the moral order of the world. It also demonstrates God's willingness to start anew with those who remain faithful, highlighting both the severity of divine judgment and the hope for redemption. The plagues of Egypt are another instance of divine punishment, where God responds to Pharaoh's refusal to free the Israelites from slavery. Each plague escalates in intensity, ultimately culminating in the death of the firstborn sons of Egypt. These plagues serve as a direct confrontation between God's power and Pharaoh's defiance, illustrating the consequences of resisting God's will. The punishment of Egypt leads to the liberation of the Israelites, reinforcing the theme of justice and deliverance in the biblical narrative. The punishment of Sodom and Gomorrah is a stark example of God's judgment against rampant immorality and sin. These cities are destroyed by fire and brimstone due to their inhabitants' extreme wickedness, serving as a warning of the consequences of living in opposition to God's laws. The story underscores the idea that divine punishment can be both swift and total when sin reaches a certain threshold, reinforcing the importance of righteousness and obedience. Finally, the story of King David and the consequences of his sins provides a more personal example of punishment. After committing adultery with Bathsheba and orchestrating the death of her husband, Uriah, David faces severe repercussions, including the death of his child and ongoing strife within his family. This narrative highlights that even those favored by God are not immune to punishment when they stray from his commandments. It also emphasizes the themes of repentance, as David's acknowledgement of his sins and his plea for forgiveness play a crucial role in his eventual restoration. The relationship between sin, justice, and punishment is a central theme in the Bible. Sin, defined as disobedience to God's commands, inevitably leads to punishment as a form of divine justice. This punishment serves as a response to wrongdoing, ensuring that justice is upheld within God's moral order. The Bible teaches that justice is not arbitrary, but is deeply rooted in God's holy nature, where sin cannot go unaddressed. Therefore, punishment is both a consequence of sin and a means to restore balance and righteousness. God's justice, however, is always tempered with mercy. While punishment is necessary to address sin, God's ultimate desire is not to condemn, but to offer a path to redemption. Throughout the Bible, instances of punishment are often accompanied by opportunities for repentance and forgiveness. This balance between justice and mercy reflects God's character. He is just and righteous, yet also compassionate and willing to forgive those who genuinely turn away from their sins. Punishment in the Bible is meant to lead to repentance and restoration rather than simply being punitive. The goal of divine punishment is to bring individuals and communities back into right relationship with God. By experiencing the consequences of their actions, people are encouraged to recognize their wrongdoing, seek forgiveness, and make amends. This process of repentance and restoration is central to the biblical understanding of justice, where the ultimate aim is not merely to punish, but to heal and renew. In the teachings of Jesus, the emphasis shifts from strict retribution to forgiveness and mercy. While Jesus acknowledges the reality of sin and its consequences, he consistently teaches that forgiveness should be at the forefront of our responses. Jesus urges his followers to forgive not just once, but repeatedly, as a reflection of God's boundless mercy. This approach challenges the conventional understanding of punishment, suggesting that love and forgiveness can be more powerful in transforming lives than retribution. The concept of turning the other cheek, as taught by Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount, further illustrates this radical approach to punishment. Rather than retaliating against wrongdoers, Jesus encourages his followers to respond with patience and humility, rejecting the cycle of vengeance. This teaching promotes a higher standard of conduct, where mercy and nonviolence take precedence over the desire for retribution, embodying the spirit of love that underpins Jesus' message. Jesus also uses parables to illustrate the balance between punishment and mercy, such as the parable of the unforgiving servant. In this story, a servant who is forgiven a great debt by his master refuses to extend the same mercy to a fellow servant. The unforgiving servant is then punished for his lack of compassion, highlighting the expectation that those who receive mercy must also be willing to offer it to others. This parable underscores the idea that while punishment is sometimes necessary, it should always be guided by a spirit of forgiveness and compassion, aligning with the broader teachings of Jesus on love and reconciliation. The Bible's stance on capital punishment is complex and has been the subject of much debate. In the Old Testament, capital punishment is prescribed for certain crimes, such as murder and blasphemy, reflecting the seriousness with which God's law is to be upheld. However, the New Testament introduces a shift, with Jesus advocating for forgiveness and mercy over strict retribution. This has led to differing interpretations among Christians, with some seeing capital punishment as a necessary form of justice, while others argue that it contradicts the teachings of Jesus on mercy and the sanctity of life. Hell and the concept of eternal punishment are also contentious issues within Christianity. The Bible speaks of hell as a place of eternal separation from God, reserved for those who reject His grace and persist in sin. Jesus often refers to hell in His teachings, emphasizing the seriousness of sin and the consequences of rejecting God. However, the interpretation of hell as a literal place of eternal torment has been debated, with some modern Christians questioning the compatibility of eternal punishment with a loving and merciful God. Modern Christian perspectives on these issues vary widely. Some denominations uphold traditional views on capital and eternal punishment, emphasizing justice and the consequences of sin. Others advocate for the abolition of capital punishment and offer alternative interpretations of hell, focusing on the possibility of reconciliation and redemption even beyond death. These debates continue to shape Christian thought and practice, reflecting the ongoing struggle to balance justice, mercy, and the teachings of Jesus in a complex world. In conclusion, the Bible presents a multifaceted view of punishment, blending justice with mercy. We've explored how punishment serves as both a consequence of sin and a tool for restoration, with examples ranging from the Old Testament's retributive justice to the New Testament's emphasis on forgiveness and reconciliation. Jesus' teachings, in particular, challenge us to prioritize love and mercy even when justice is required. As you reflect on these biblical teachings, consider how they influence your views on punishment in your own life. Are you leaning more towards retribution, or do you embrace the call for forgiveness and restoration? The balance between justice and mercy is delicate, and the Bible offers profound insights that can guide us in making compassionate and just decisions. Thank you for joining us in this exploration. If you have thoughts or questions, we invite you to share them in the comments below. Let's continue the conversation and grow together in understanding how to live out these biblical principles in our daily lives.